Hello again, everyone. This is a follow-up to my last video on why your contractor's estimate can't be trusted, and to underscore that point, and also show you again how much you don't see when you look at the finished project. So before I get into some of the details, I wanted to tell you a little bit about this bathroom floor itself, because that's of course where the work all started. Now, when I first came in here to work on it, what I was dealing with was, or at least what was visible, was linoleum tile. But as soon as you begin to take that up, you found, or I found, 3/8 inch plywood. And under that I found another layer of much, much older linoleum sheet. I assumed that at one point this stuff was flexible and came in a roll, but it was so old and brittle that it came up in split pieces. And it has a very tar paper-like backing that clung to the floor. So just to get it this clean, I had to do a lot of scraping. And of course, for some reason, they put that down with tacks in a lot of places, and so I was peeling tacks up and prying them up, digging them out everywhere. It took a lot of work. As I was going along, I found some interesting things. One of them was this hole that I've now leveled, or mostly leveled. Now, when I peeled up the linoleum, what I found sitting on the floor was this. Now, as you'll recall, I showed you in the last video that the kitchen ceiling is not a true ceiling. It's a drop ceiling, a sheetrock drop ceiling that they put in about 1.5 feet lower than the original ceiling. So what was going on is that this house was originally heated by a coal burning or wood burning, I'm going to call it a furnace, a big steel constructed thing that had some heating ducts coming off of it, and of course a chimney coming through the house. And what they did was they only had registers coming up to the first floor, and so they had passive heat coming up to the second. So there was this register, and then this piece of ducting. It just went down to the original ceiling, and then on the bottom, actually it had fallen and was lying on top of the dropped ceiling was this, and of course they had it facing this way, so from underneath this is what you would have seen. Beautiful pieces that they just covered and left hidden. We're gonna reuse this one. We have a modern heating register in the kitchen floor that cannot stand up to people walking on it, so this cast iron is much more sturdy and more beautiful. So that'll take a little bit of work, but we'll do that. Anyway, so this had to be reinforced and then filled a little bit with some plywood so that we could put in this leveling compound. This stuff is a very nice product, by the way. But the other thing that I found as I was coming along using the leveling compound is that the floor has more problems than I realized. When you're scraping it, it doesn't stand out so much. But what I found is that this tongue and groove got so wet over the years that it cupped, and that wasn't helped at all by the way they tried to do the floor. You can see there's some pretty dramatic gaps. Just for reference, I mean that's your standard stir stick, and there's still extra space in there. And it's because as they tried to do it, as they did it, they tried to get all fancy and hide their nails, and they were using this giant. I've never seen a nail like this. It looks like a finished nail until you hold a finished nail up next to it. And then you see that's what a normal finished nail looks like. What they tried to do was hide these down in the gaps and then butt the next plank up against it. And of course that did not work, and that was a problem all over this upstairs. So these gaps allowed more water in, and what happened is that these weak lips on this tongue and groove, so the upper sides of the groove warped upwards, cupped upwards, and it's kind of hard to see how bad it is. I tried to come up with a way to illustrate it. So let me show you a demonstration, because it's hard to see. Let's show it this way. Watch how much it moves when I push down in the middle over here. You can see that. And the problem with that is that if I were to put modern flooring over that, it would create a rocking point, a stress point, so that when you walked on it, the middle would begin to take more pressure than the sides, and it would shorten the life of the floor dramatically. So the underlayment can take care of some of that. So I'm not going to worry about this one here. This one's not so bad. But some of these others, I'm going to have to bring in and do more underlay, more leveler. In addition, I mentioned before that the planks that I was using didn't completely match. That wasn't quite true. The truth is that with the way the house and floor has settled, nothing is really consistent. These two did seem to be oddball, cut from a plank that was a little thinner than the others. To keep the limestone-based concrete leveler off of the copper fittings, I had to dam up these corners, so that was tedious work. This stuff fights you. Got little things to fill over there too. This was a big, a former hole. The other thing that we ran into is there were several gaps and holes, and as I tried to fill those up or stop those up so that leveling compound wouldn't run out, I ran into just more splitting. And so there was a big knot here, and I tried to plug that, and what happened is that more just split out. And so I had to slip a piece down in there with a screw in it and a string tied to it and pull it around and turn it and hold it in place with a flat bar so that I could drive more screws into it and hold it up so that we could then fill. And I had to do a similar thing, although over here I was able to come up from underneath from the kitchen here, and you can see this still hasn't completely leveled. So altogether, aside from the framing and the completely unanticipated work, the floor itself was more work than ever planned. And so we're going to have to do a final run of leveling compound, and then we will be able to put our underlayment down and start doing our flooring. That doesn't even mention the nailing that I had to do. A lot of these planks, because they were trying to be so fancy, they weren't really securely nailed, and I had a lot of floating. I had squeaking on every floor. I've had to redo every floor in this upstairs, and this is the last bit. And I had to go through and nail plank by plank in every single one of these upstairs rooms, especially where they cut and then didn't nail themselves. I know those look old, but they're actually just nails that I salvaged. Anywhere that they cut, I had to nail it back down and reinforce because they kind of just left it floating. So obviously this isn't as hairy. If it was just the floor itself and I hadn't had to deal with everything else, it still would have taken longer than planned. You know, if your contractor had said, oh, I can do this in just 2 days, and it ended up taking, a week, or, depending on the space, the guys he had working, a week's pretty big for just the floor. But if he'd said 3 days and it took him 4, then there's your explanation why. These things go sideways all the time. And old houses are not the only houses that do this. New, modern houses, people take shortcuts just like they always have, and especially your guy that's just paid, new on the job. He doesn't take pride in his work. He's there to make a buck and get out. If he runs out of nails right before lunch, he's not going to make sure he comes back and gets that spot he missed. He's going to go move on. Going to pick up the nails and just move on to the next board. He's not going to... He'll put in a few to hold it in place so he can move on, and they'll never get back to it. And so you'll find these issues in a new house as well as an old. Mine is a special case of, like I said, 100 years of bad renovation, but sometimes new build is the problem. And it just depends what your poison is. Usually with the newer houses, you don't have so many layers of bad jobs. But once again, thank you for watching. And I hope that if it doesn't make you sympathetic to your contractor, it'll at least make you appreciate how hard he's working for you, if he's good and reputable, and how hard it can be to do a good job. So thank you, and tune in next time.